Good late Sunday morning, and join what it's kind of our staff meeting, it seems like, with Brian and Tom. It's usually about 10 or 15 minutes of conversation before this comes on. But you're watching our Sunday conversation, and brought to you by the Purdue Union Club Hotel. Reinvented, re-energized, whatever you want to use to describe. It is a beautiful facility on campus, and doing as well as it can in the pandemic, and doing well. It's been in there a couple of times. The 811 restaurant, terrific as well. The Boilermaker, the Boiler Up bar, I should say. If we ever would get less than 15 inches of snow on the ground here, we would be in better shape to enjoy that. But we appreciate all they do. And we also want to remind you that this is, if you're watching this and not a subscriber to goldandblack.com, please consider doing so. We have 40-day free trials available. Brian's work and Tom's work is well worth the time, and the message boards are the gift that keeps on giving, and fun place to get to know what's not only other Purdue sports fans and knuckleheads, so to speak, but what is going on in the world of Purdue sports. So we appreciate our current subscribers as well. All right, Brian, I'm going to start with you. Obviously, Purdue, at least for me, had a couple nervous moments yesterday. They actually trailed in the second half, and then Sasha Stefanovic and others just blew the doors off of Nebraska, and what was really an important win for Purdue in Lincoln yesterday, because the Boilermakers can entertain a chance to make that double bye in the Big Ten tournament if it can take care of business.
Yeah, I didn't think Purdue was ever in real credible trouble because I thought the battle of attrition element was always going to come into play there, where Nebraska has talent enough, I think, to have flashes and to be competitive for periods of time. And obviously, they've been much more competitive since they came out of COVID. But I thought Purdue was always going to kind of wear them down. And I thought Matt Painter almost approached the game that way too. When you look at some of the minutes, I thought that Eric Hunter, they were way better with Eric Hunter on the floor, and he only played 27 minutes when he could have played 30 plus. Travion Williams didn't play big minutes. I thought Nebraska did a good job against him. Zach Edey obviously played well, so a lot went into that. But I didn't think Purdue was ever really. I thought Purdue was building up to finish strong, and that's exactly what they did. And I thought had they just made some shots earlier, you can say that about any game, but had they just made some shots earlier, I think they would have ran away and hit a little earlier too. You have to give Nebraska a lot of credit here for competing.
Yeah, you do,
because they're in an impossible situation here. Impossible. And the fact that they rallied back from 11 down in the first half, when they have every reason in the world to lose every game the rest of the way. And then they took the lead there early in the second half. And then Purdue was just too much for them. But you do have to give Nebraska a lot of credit. But when Purdue started making shots, that was it. I mean, if that's the 8 minutes this season that represents Sasha Stefanovic becoming Sasha Stefanovic again, that might have been one of the most important 8-minute stretches of Purdue's season.
Yeah, no question.
Yeah, Brian, the schedule sets up nice for Purdue here to close out the regular season. Obviously backloaded with a lot of home games. Purdue goes on the road next to Penn State, then that's it. They finish up at home. We're still waiting to hear, I guess, on a makeup date with Nebraska coming to West Lafayette. But again, you mentioned on some of your Twitter last night, Purdue's already surpassed last year's Big Ten victory total. Yeah. Kind of playing with house money at this point. It's been a real fun season. Chance to finish with, 13 Big Ten wins? I don't know, maybe 14. Talked about the double bye possibility for the Big Ten tournament. Long story short, Stefanovic is back. Everybody's healthy. Home games loom. Guess what I'm trying to say, guys, is there's a chance to build a lot of momentum.
Yeah, for sure.
February turns into March.
Yeah, I don't think the trip to Penn State's going to be a picnic, but they obviously lost to Nebraska there. They're kind of a wild card.
Yeah.
I think some of those guys might have a foot out the door too with all the coaching overhaul that's going on there. But who do they have next? Wisconsin at home?
No, it's next Friday at Penn State.
At Penn State next.
Oh, Penn State's next. Okay. I don't think that's going to be a picnic, but I think, Purdue stacks up well with Wisconsin at home. I think Purdue's better than Wisconsin personally.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you're going to win that game, but I think you stack up well. You should beat Indiana at home. When you get that Nebraska game back, which I'm assuming they do, you obviously should win that game. Who am I forgetting?
That's it.
Purdue has a chance here to end, pretty strong, build some momentum going into the postseason. I think it helped Purdue to have that front-loaded Big Ten schedule where you played those really difficult games early. You played a lot of people at the wrong time, because I think had you played Iowa, later in the season when you were peaking and they were maybe hitting a little bit of a malaise, I think you would have stacked up better. Rutgers you can say the same thing about them. But I think that's benefiting Purdue now. I think playing those games early on was beneficial to this team in terms of their growth. I think now, I've said this a bunch of times this season, Purdue's whole again. I think, Stefanovic is rounding back into form. I think Jaden Ivey's playing his best basketball, obviously. Zach Edey's playing well. Mason Gillis is playing well. Brandon Newman's doing some positive things. Travion Williams has been really consistent all season long. I think Purdue's got a lot going for it. Eric Hunter's playing some of his best offensive basketball of the year. I think that Purdue's got a lot going for it here. And if this trend continues, I think you have a chance to close this regular season pretty emphatically and have some real momentum going into the postseason.
Yeah, Iowa's got who's Purdue's biggest competition for the double bye at this point. Has games, I think, with Michigan and Illinois as well. So the Hawkeyes, Purdue would obviously have to be ahead of Iowa. They would lose the tiebreaker in that situation. And again, how much that matters in the Big Ten tournament. You're going to have a tough game anywhere you look. I mean, even in game one, you're going to run into maybe Michigan State, somebody like that's dangerous, or Penn State in the Big Ten tournament. I think it's just like you talked about. It's a momentum thing, and that's what's going to be. Purdue seems to have a lot of that on its side right now. All right, we'll switch gears now to football. We all heard from Jeff Brom on Thursday. It was good to hear from him and get his look at what the Boilermakers are going to kind of be trying to get done in literally the next calendar month, February 19th to March 19th. They have 15 practices, and they've had their first one. Tom, impressions about Jeff Brom, but also hearing from Brian Brom and the quarterbacks on Friday. Interesting storylines. There's a lot of them, I think, with Purdue football right now. It's going to be fun to watch. How much we'll know because we can't see and we get fed information, so to speak. But it will be an interesting storyline all the way up to that September 4th opener, hopefully against Oregon State.
Yeah, before the old Beavers stroll in from Corvallis. That'll be here before we know it, guys. Obviously, always good to hear from Coach Brom. And the questions everybody have, guys, again, focus back on that defense. When you have 3 staff changes there with the new coordinator being one of them, we're all eager to see how that ends up fleshing out. I think to a man, we all like the 3 hires, Brad Lambert, Mark Hagan, and Ron English. And defensively, guys, what is going to be the base scheme? And from what I've learned, we can expect the base to have a 4-man front. But obviously, Purdue is going to be multiple. You're going to obviously see them in a 3-4, maybe even in a 3-3-5. So they're going to be flexible, multiple, depending on their opponent. But it's important to note, the base front will be a 4-man front. Jeff Brom knows the importance of putting George Karlaftis in positions to excel. Same goes for DeMarcus Mitchell, the junior college transfer last year, who impressed all of us guys. He could end up being a defensive end. We're still going to get a look at linebacker. So, again, a lot of moving parts, some newcomers, too, on defense, some veteran newcomers, the transfers guys. Joseph Anderson, defensive end from South Carolina. O.C. Brothers, the linebacker from Auburn. They're on campus. Can they impact? Later this summer, we're going to get the transfer from Florida, C.J. McWilliams, the cornerback. So, again, it's exciting. Anytime there's a renewal, there's always hope. Possibilities seem endless. And again, these coaches give me a lot of pause for excitement, guys. And then real quick, too, on Friday, we spoke to Brian Brom, as Alan mentioned, the quarterbacks coach. We also spoke to all the quarterbacks as well. And I guess the big news there, guys, is Aiden O'Connell. Not a big shock. We thought he was going to be limited this spring coming off foot surgery. He certainly will be limited. Brian Brom does not, of course, want him to have any crazy mishaps, somebody falling on his foot, getting any contact inadvertently, just to aggravate the injury, guys. What was news to me was he actually had 2 separate injuries to his right foot against Illinois and against Northwestern. O'Connell had surgery December 8th, but again, Jeff Brom also said he's ahead of schedule from his recovery. That's going to leave everybody a full off season now to speculate, right? Who's going to be the opener when Oregon State comes out on September 4th?
Brian, I thought it was interesting that Jeff Brom talked openly about being more involved with the defense. And yet I think you asked him the question about the importance of hiring experienced coaches, of which the three that he's hired are extremely experienced guys. Two of the three have head coaching experience. The one that doesn't, Mark Hagan, is been around Purdue for 11 seasons or however long he was here. Mm-hmm. How do you take that, and what was your takeaway from what he said there, and how much that blends into what will be the story of the 21 season?
Well, it's one thing to hire experience. It's another thing to leverage the experience. And I think the important part of it is to have a diversity of thought and get some value out of that experience. I don't think anybody has all the answers. I think Jeff Brom realizes that, and I think that's an important tack to take in terms of the situation Purdue's in right now, where they have to work their way out of this 2-year malaise here. So I think that's kind of the important part of it. Ron English has been a head coach. Neil Callaway's been a head coach. Brad Lambert's been a head coach. Anthony Poindexter obviously has extensive coordinator experience. Mark Hagan's coached for some great programs with some great head coaches. Been part of a lot of success, been part of a lot of rebuilding processes too. There's going to be a lot of different viewpoints here. And it's a matter of how much value you can draw from that experience. When Jeff Brom got here, I don't know if he had the most experienced, staff around him. A lot of younger guys. That's not to say those guys weren't good coaches, but they weren't, this sort of old heads he's got now around him. So it'll be interesting to see what impact having a more experienced, staff around him has. Obviously, Nick Holt had been a head coach. Bob Diaco had been a head coach before Tony Levine was a head coach when he first got here. But now he's just got so much more experience around him. And I think probably this seemed to me during the interview the other day that enough self-awareness to understand that, I may not always have all the answers. And as he said, we want everybody in the room to have a voice here. And that's, I think, the significant part of this.
Yeah, and Tom, you listened as Brian and I interviewed Mike Babinski for Golden Black Live on Friday. I thought Mike talked about that, a little bit of that mentorship relationship and what he had, the numerous discussions that he had with Jeff Brom about just some things that maybe need to get shored up. That's normal when you've had a couple losing seasons in a row, or seasons that were, technically 3. But the fact is that you haven't quite met expectations. And now at the lens of 36, 48 hours later, anything that Mike said that kind of ties into what we're going to see on the field this year?
I think, like sort of reiterating what Brian said, and you alluded to as well, Alan, was Jeff Brom's willingness to listen to others, to take other points of views into consideration, and then to also be a man of action and make changes if he thinks changes need to be made. Sometimes, people don't like to admit maybe they made a mistake. Our ego can get in the way a lot of times in life for everybody. But that's when you have to sometimes, again, take the counsel of others and evaluate things closely. And Jeff Brom's certainly shown a willingness to do that. I do think this is probably his strongest defensive staff since he's gotten here. At least I personally think that. And to that point, guys, Brian mentioned Neil Callaway. And that was another bit of news that emerged on Friday as well, how the offensive staff has just been tweaked here. Of course, Dale Williams is still the offensive line coach, but Neil Callaway was brought in last year as a senior analyst. Brian talked about his background as a UAB head coach, also been an O-line coach at a lot of very important, prominent places like Auburn, Georgia, and Alabama, among others, and USC. Now Neil Callaway's a 10th full-time on-field assistant coach. His title is the assistant offensive line coach. Jeff Brom just wanted to get another set of eyes on the field during practices and games to instruct this offensive line. The fallout from this is Ryan Wallace, the tight ends coach, is now moving into an off-field role as sort of an assistant for special teams and tight ends. He's still going to work with the tight ends, but Dale Williams will pervade the tight ends on the field during practices and games. So again, Jeff really wants to tap into that knowledge Neil brings that Brian talked about. Neil's 66 years old, I think, and he worked with Jeff once as well in the past. So again, I've talked about this offensive line before, guys. I think could be very, very good. And, again, they brought in the transfer Tyler Witt from Western Kentucky. And that'll be my last point, guys, that the transfer market. Jeff is going to continue to shop that market. We've talked about the 4 transfers he has now, but he has said that he's told me that they are not going to stop there. They're always shopping for guys. They think somebody can add value and contribute right away. They're going to bring that player in. He says they're always looking for linemen on both sides of the ball too. So fans should be aware at any time we could see some of these transfers pop still and land on this Purdue roster.
Yeah. So do they not have a formal tight ends coach anymore?
Nope, they do not. That's Dale Williams is the guy who's overseeing tight ends, Brian.
That's interesting because that's an important part of their offense. Obviously, they use that position as much as anybody in college football, probably in their best case scenario. I was thinking about that. The tight ends on the roster, Brian, they're going to be around a while. Payne Durham is a redshirt junior, and of course Garrett Miller, Kyle Bilodeau will be redshirt sophomores. Drew Bieber's coming in as his true freshman. These guys have another year of eligibility they can use from this COVID year as well. So, they're set up pretty well here, and I still think there's a chance for these guys to be mentored properly, still with Ryan Wallace and what Dale and sure Neil can bring to him as well.
I will switch last subject, and an important one to all of us is Larry Clisby. And Larry is a guy that we've known for years, and Brian and Tom and I all have, and a guy that I wrote something on the message boards today, a little bit about just my experience with him, but a guy that also has reinvented himself many times. 74th birthday today for Larry. And Brian, I know you've maintained a close relationship with him over the years. Larry watches and listens to our stuff, so we always appreciate that when he's down in Tampa with Michelle. But put a little bit of that in perspective. It's a birthday to celebrate, but Larry is still having an impact. I can envision him yesterday when Sasha Stefanovic was going off that bullseye thing. I think he would have been hoarse by the time that was over when Stefanovic had his flurry. But Brian, any context there you want to provide?
Yeah, I don't think people understand how big a part of Purdue's program, he was during his career, how much he's loved in those basketball offices. Matt Painter loves the man. Elliot Bloom loves the man. The players always love the guy. Based off my experience, kind of like just kind of that old wise head people kind of leaned on, for friendship, for camaraderie, for his wisdom, for his life experience, just a great personality, a one-of-a-kind dude. And I hate the fact that this damn pandemic, struck right on top of his retirement, and he didn't, get to live out his retirement here up to this point in a normal world. That sucks, but I'm sure he's missed around Purdue's basketball offices. I'm sure they're keeping in contact with him, checking in on him every day or whatever it is. And he's definitely missed around here. That's for sure.
Tom, we go back to watching him, listening to him in the 80s as well. Heck, I remember when Henry Rosenthal hired him, if you can imagine that, back in the late 70s. But your reflections on Larry, and this good day to celebrate and think about that with his 74th birthday.
Yeah, I remember as a student walking in that side door into the SID office there. And this is when I work in basketball games, keeping stats for Big Jim Brugian, if I kept a shot chart or something. Yeah. I used to go down and get the opposing head coach's quotes after the game and go back and dictate them to Jan Winger.
Yeah.
But I digress. My memory is Larry Wiggy sort of strolling in there, kind of holding court there in the SID office. He used to bring in an old coat rack. Everybody would hang their coats up. They had a big cooler filled with Coca-Cola products. And I guess I was a little bit in awe, Alan.
Yeah.
And I guess that's my point. These guys are treasures. They've seen a lot at these institutions. You mentioned his hiring in the late 70s, all the basketball that he saw, the knowledge that he brought to that job. It's invaluable, and you cannot replace that. The guys like Larry are institutions. Now, I was glad to see the last few years he was honored justly and recognized, and got to see how much he was loved, appreciated, and how good he was at his job. And again, like I said, other schools have guys of this ilk. You think of the guy in Indiana,
Todd Fisher, yeah.
Yeah, Tom Fisher. I mean, I go on and on. Brian Barnhart at Illinois. But again, Larry was a Purdue institution who is still greatly missed. And I was really glad that Matt Painter kept him in the family. Elliot Bloom and those guys embraced him and then got to see Larry, work these last few years too.
Yeah, Brian, I think back when we used to have an office, in essence, we still have an office, but back when we used to have office time, I've made a comment today about him coming into the office, and you know this more because you're the busiest guy on earth, but he would come in and everything would stop. I don't care what you were doing. He would come in, hold court. It would take an hour sometimes, an hour we didn't always have, but I always learned something from that standpoint. And I think, I know he enjoyed being around you too, just because the conversation between the two of you got to be interesting at times because you both have such an intimate knowledge of the Purdue men's basketball program.
Yeah, he's the thing about Larry too is that it wasn't just talking about basketball. I remember sitting at practice one day and he's there. He's got people around him, and he's talking about World War II because he'd watched a documentary the night before, and he's just an interesting, worldly, intelligent, well-rounded guy too. And I always enjoyed talking to him, not just about basketball, but just about life. We share a little bit of. We both have some war stories to tell about some respective health issues we've both dealt with. He was always a guy I kind of valued talking to about that sort of stuff too. But he was just a guy who has a really unique perspective on life and a real wisdom about him. And I miss those conversations. I miss those conversations with everyone right now because I don't see the people I cover in person anymore, but I especially miss those conversations with Larry.
Yeah, Larry is on his 74th birthday. That we'd all miss that, and you're right. Larry has been over the road, and he's self-admitted to being over the road a lot. But that was, and I'll speak for myself as well. Very valuable experience and perspective, and 90% of it wasn't about basketball. To be very honest,
there's not a lot of pretense there. He's as genuine a guy as I think I know. And I think that's one of the ultimate compliments you can give somebody. And he just is self-aware. He is reflective. He's just a genuine, down to earth sort of individual. And I really miss being around him, as a lot of people do.
Yeah. Well, happy birthday, Larry. And I know you'll listen to this and watch this at some point today. So we appreciate you and all you've meant to us over the years. All right, guys, really enjoyed the show today, as I always do. And I want to thank our sponsor, the Purdue Union Club Hotel, the 811 Restaurant, Boiler Up Bar, the good folks there that have helped bring this to fruition and the support they give us. And of course, a reminder that if you would like to become a subscriber to goldenblack.com, a member, so to speak, it's much more than a subscription. It's a membership. You get the message boards, you get the conversation, you get Brian and Tom's great work, the premium work they do as well. But consider a 40-day free trial. You can link almost any story has a tile at the top. Make sure you click on that tile and you can subscribe or at least give it a whirl. And we appreciate all the folks, the many thousands of folks that do that on a weekly basis. So, all right, guys, have a great rest of the week, rest of the day. And we'll look forward to what will be an interesting week with spring football going heavily, men's basketball staring at what could be it will be an exciting time, no matter win or lose. It's going to be interesting throughout the rest of this season. But guys, have a great rest of your Sunday. And to you, all your listeners and viewers, please do so as well. Have a great day.